The galaxy knew Earth. It knew its vibrant, chaotic colonies, its bustling trade ports, its eager, often naive diplomats. It knew humanity as passionate, volatile, easily wounded, and ultimately, weak. Useful, perhaps. Annoyingly persistent. But fragile. A species of poets and engineers who still wept over fallen comrades and believed, foolishly, in inherent rights and universal compassion. The great powers of the Galactic Union, ancient and secure in their vastness, regarded Earth with a mixture of patronization and mild amusement. The Cthar hegemony, all chitin and cold calculation, saw them as little more than a potential resource, their emotional core a predictable, exploitable flaw. The serene, enigmatic Cygnus conclave deemed them aesthetically interesting but strategically irrelevant. Earth, they thought, was a garden world best left undisturbed, its inhabitants a curiosity, not a threat. Earth itself had tried. It had sent envoys carrying offers of alliance, treaties of mutual respect, proposals for shared scientific endeavors. These were received in opulent halls, politely acknowledged, and then quietly filed away in bureaucratic archives, gathering dust. The Union valued stability, established hierarchies. Humanity, with its rapid growth and unpredictable nature, represented a variable they preferred to contain, not integrate. The Cthar, for their part, answered overtures with predatory trade deals that bled colonies dry or border skirmishes designed to probe defenses and instill fear. Earth warned, it pleaded, it protested. Its warnings were dismissed as hyperbole. Its pleas were met with silence. Its protests were answered with increased pressure. Then came the catalyst. The resource-rich sector known as the Azure Belt. Strategically vital, teeming with mineral wealth, it was claimed by Earth, a claim backed by centuries of colonization and development. The Cthar coveted it. The Union saw a convenient flashpoint, an opportunity to check Cthar expansion while simultaneously reminding Earth of its place. A treaty was brokered, or so Earth believed. A partition. Half to the hegemony, half remaining under Earth's protection, with joint oversight. Earth signed, weary but hopeful. The ink was barely dry when the Cthar strike fleets, bolstered by Union auxiliary forces conveniently looking the other way, descended not on the mining installations, but on the primary civilian hub, Station Prime. It was not a strategic bombardment. It was an extermination. Plasma rained down, not on defenses, but on residential sectors, on schools, on hospitals. The Cthar landed ground forces, not to capture, but to cleanse. They moved with chilling efficiency, their chitinous bodies impervious to the colonists' desperate, scattered resistance. They broadcast their actions across the sector's open channels, a live feed of terror and slaughter, lesson for anyone who dared to stand in the hegemony's path. Union ships stood by at the system edge, silent observers, their engines cold. They logged the event as a regrettable Cthar overreach, a lapse in adherence to the spirit of the treaty. They did nothing to intervene. Nothing to stop the screams that echoed across the void. Among the scattered freighters attempting a futile evacuation was the Stardust Drifter, a dilapidated cargo hauler piloted by Captain Eva Rostova, her cargo hold packed with refugees, her comms officer a young, green ensign named Marcus Thorne. They watched, helpless, as Station Prime became an inferno. They heard the final, choked broadcasts before the comms went dead. They saw the Cthar ship systematically hunting down escape pods, their energy weapons cutting through the void with cold indifference. Thorne, barely out of the academy, watched a Union cruiser drift past his viewscreen, its hull reflecting the distant, burning station. It did not alter course. It did not offer aid. It simply watched. Thorne recorded everything. Every chilling detail, every crackle of the dying broadcasts, every image of the Union's passive complicity. He watched the Cthar commander, General Vrax, step onto the bridge of Station Prime, bathed in the light of its destruction, and declare the Azure Belt pacified. The Stardust Drifter was one of the few ships to escape, its hull scarred, its occupants traumatized, carrying the only full, unredacted record of the atrocity back towards Earth. Marcus Thorne, forever changed by the silence of the Union and the screams from Station Prime, carried the memory. The return of the Stardust Drifter was not met with fanfare. It was met with silence. The galactic media, influenced by Union and Kthar reports, painted a picture of a minor colonial uprising, a tragic but necessary security action. Earth's government, stunned and reeling, struggled to process the scale of the loss. But the raw data, the agonizing recordings from Thorn, spread like wildfire. Through secure nets, through whispered conversations, the truth reached every corner of Earth and its remaining colonies. The polite dismissal, the predatory exploitation, the final, brutal betrayal. The galaxy had not just attacked a colony. It had attacked humanity's core, its belief in progress and shared future. A wave of grief, deep and profound, washed over humanity. Billions mourned. But beneath the grief, something else stirred. A cold, hard rage. It wasn't the fleeting, emotional outburst the galaxy expected. This was different. This was the slow burn of a species that had been pushed too far, that had seen the true face of indifference and cruelty. Borders dissolved. Political rivalries vanished. Ideological differences became meaningless. There was only one shared experience: the galaxy had inflicted an unimaginable wound, and the galaxy had expected them to simply bleed out. A vow was made, not in grand declarations, but in the quiet resolve of every survivor, every family member of the lost, every citizen who heard the final screams. Never again. They would never again be vulnerable. They would never again plead. They would never again be underestimated. The governments unified, quietly at first, then with chilling efficiency. Resources were reallocated. Industries were nationalized. The entire focus of human civilization shifted. Diplomacy was not abandoned, but it withered, replaced by a singular, grim determination, the acquisition of power sufficient to ensure absolute, unassailable security. Then, Earth went silent. Not entirely. Trade continued, though diminished. Diplomatic outposts remained, staffed by eerily stoic individuals who deflected inquiries with polite non-answers. But Earth itself, and its core systems, pulled inward. Space traffic dwindled. Communications became encrypted, opaque. The galaxy interpreted this silence in various ways. The Union bureaucracy concluded Earth was collapsing, racked by internal dissent and trauma. The Kthar hegemony saw it as a sign of broken spirit, the expected outcome of their lesson. The Cygnus conclave noted the shift with detached interest, adjusting their predictive models. 5 years passed. 10. Then 20. In the silent decades that followed, human society was utterly transformed. Academia wasn't just funded, it was weaponized. Theoretical physics labs became engine design bureaus working on impossible drives. Quantum mechanics research became the foundation for new forms of shielding and silent running. Biological sciences turned their attention to enhancing endurance, reaction times, cognitive function, not for health, but for combat. Old Earth archives, long neglected, yielded fragments of forgotten knowledge, whispers of energies and forces the galaxy deemed mythological. Humanity didn't just build ships, they built instruments of oblivion. They didn't just train soldiers, they forged instruments of vengeance. Entire generations were born into this transformed world, their lullabies the quiet hum of fabrication yards and the distant drills of training centers, their history lessons the stark images Thorn had captured decades ago. Admiral Valerius, the scarred veteran who had lost his family on Station Prime, oversaw the transformation of the fleet. Dr. Eris Thorn, Marcus's son, led the research into forbidden technology, driven by his father's trauma and the cold data he inherited. Solace, the network AI initially designed for galactic trade, was repurposed, its vast intellect now focused on logistics, encryption, and predictive analysis, anticipating every possible enemy move. The silence was not collapse. It was gestation. The galaxy had largely forgotten the Azure Belt atrocity, relegated to a historical footnote, a cautionary tale about minor powers overstepping their bounds. The Union continued its bureaucratic sprawl, the Kthar their predatory expansion. The balance of power, they believed, was eternal, immutable. And then, after 40 years of silence, Earth returned. There were no grand announcements, no diplomatic overtures. Their reappearance was a singularity event, a tear in the fabric of the perceived order. It began not with a fleet, but with a single ship appearing on the edge of the Kthar system of Xylos, a core hegemony staging ground. It was small, dark, unlike any vessel the galaxy had ever seen. The Kthar System Defense Network, confident and powerful, issued standard hails. Receiving no response, they launched a squadron of interceptors. The small human ship didn't evade. It didn't fire conventional weapons. Instead, a wave emanated from it, not energy, but something that felt like a missing frequency, a void in reality. The interceptors, caught in the wave, didn't explode. They simply ceased. Their forms flickered, distorted, and then were gone, leaving behind no debris, no energy signature. The Kthar commanders, baffled, ordered their main battle group forward. The human ship made no aggressive move, merely holding its position. As the battle group closed, the wave expanded. It washed over the Kthar cruisers, their mighty hulls designed to withstand nova shocks and plasma torrents. They twisted. Metal groaned. Their shields, their armor, their very structure seemed to peel away, dissolving into nothingness. Within minutes, the Kthar battle group was gone. The silent ship then broadcast a single, looping message across all frequencies: Station Prime remembers. This was the first shockwave. Xylos went dark. Panic rippled through the hegemony. The Union, receiving garbled reports, initially dismissed them as Kthar propaganda or a localized anomaly. But then came the second strike. And the third. And the 10th. Not random attacks, but surgical strikes deep within Kthar space, targeting command centers, fabrication yards, strategic choke points. The pattern was chillingly consistent: a silent approach, the deployment of the unmaking weapon, total annihilation of the target with no trace left behind, followed by the looped message: Station Prime remembers. The Kthar military, for all its might, found its tactics obsolete. Their sensor nets couldn't track the silent human ships. Their armor was useless against the unmaking wave. Their vast numbers were irrelevant when entire fleets could be wiped from existence in moments. Their arrogance shattered, replaced by primal fear. They had faced fierce foes before, but none that fought with such cold precision, such absolute finality. The human campaign was not swift, but it was relentless and systematic. It was a dismantling. They didn't conquer worlds, they neutralized threats. They bypassed civilian populations where possible, focusing their terrifying power on military installations, supply lines, and the symbols of Kthar power. Psychological warfare was woven into every action. They would leave single, crippled Kthar ships adrift in empty systems, broadcasting the fate of their fleets to anyone who would listen. They hacked public channels to display the recordings from Station Prime, forcing the galaxy to remember what had been done. They sent probes deep into enemy space, not to gather data, but to project chillingly accurate simulations of impending attacks, sowing discord and paranoia among the Kthar command. Admiral Valerius, his face a mask of grim focus, oversaw the campaign from the Bridge of the Memory, a ship whose very name was a declaration. Harrow, his loyal fleet master, executed orders with cold efficiency. Dr. Thorne's AI, Solace, analyzed enemy strategies faster than they could formulate them, predicting troop movements and counterattacks hours before they occurred. The Union watched with growing horror. Their auxiliary forces, present at Station Prime, were silently withdrawn. Their diplomats suddenly remembered Earth's ignored pleas and warnings with a new, desperate clarity. They attempted to mediate, to negotiate, to appeal to the universal laws of war. Earth's response was broadcast to the entire galaxy, a visual of Station Prime's destruction, followed by Admiral Valerius, his voice calm but filled with decades of ice. "You spoke of laws when our children burned," he said. You spoke of treaties when our homes were glass. Now, we speak of consequence, the Union scrambled. They sent fleets, vast formations meant to intimidate the resurgent humans. These fleets were met, not with battle lines, but with strategic disappearances. Human ships would phase into existence behind enemy lines, strike a single, vital target, a command ship, a primary FTL relay, and vanish before a response could be organized. Their technology seemed to bend the very rules of physics, a result of the forbidden knowledge Dr. Thorne and his team had resurrected in the silent years. Rumors circulated among the Union ranks of human ships that could move through solid matter, weapons that erased targets from time itself, or AI entities that could cripple entire fleets with silent whispers through the datasphere. The rumors were often exaggerated, but they sowed fear, which was its own weapon. The galaxy began to realize that what humanity had shown so far was likely only a fraction of its true, terrifying power. There were whispers of Project Nemesis, the Gate Song Protocol, and the chillingly named Solace Directive, systems held in reserve, too devastating for conventional use, even in this campaign of retribution. The Cthar hegemony began to crumble from within. Faced with an enemy they could not fight, whose very presence felt like an existential threat, dissent erupted. Factions within the hegemony argued for surrender, for negotiation, for fleeing to the galactic rim. Others, steeped in the hegemony's ideology of strength, demanded increasingly desperate measures. General Vrax, the architect of the Station Prime atrocity, now Supreme Commander, ordered the activation of the World Scourge devices, ancient, forbidden superweapons designed to sterilize planets. His hope was to create a cordon of death, a deterrent so horrific even the humans would flinch. The first World Scourge was unleashed on a Cthar colony world, its population evacuated beforehand. A wave of entropic energy rolled out. The human fleet, lying in wait at the system edge, did not retreat. Instead, a single, colossal human vessel, the Aegis, a ship of immense scale and power, moved to meet the wave. It deployed a shield, not of energy, but of structured reality, a field that seemed to anchor the system in place. The entropic wave hit the shield and dissipated, harmlessly absorbed. General Vrax, watching from his command ship, stared in disbelief. The humans didn't just have powerful weapons, they had counters to weapons the galaxy believed were unstoppable. Vrax, in a final act of desperate madness, turned the Second World Scourge against a human frontier world, hoping to inflict a blow regardless of the cost. The human fleet didn't arrive in time to stop the initial firing sequence. But Solace, the AI, had predicted this possibility. As the World Scourge device prepared to unleash its devastating energy, a silent human stealth drone phased into existence within its primary reactor core. A focused blast from the unmaking weapon didn't destroy the device, it unraveled it at a fundamental level. The resulting implosion didn't create an entropic wave. It created a brief, silent point of non-existence, sucking in the surrounding matter before snapping shut. General Vrax's ship, caught too close, simply vanished. His final transmission was a choked gasp of absolute terror. The human fleet, led by the memory, pushed towards the Cthar capital system, Hegemony Prime. The Cthar military threw everything they had at them, vast fleets, orbital defenses, ground armies. All were systematically, brutally swept aside. The advance was a cold, unstoppable tide. Finally, the memory and a core group of human ships arrived in orbit over Hegemony Prime. Billions of Cthar lived below, along with the remnants of their leadership, their war machine broken. The potential for vengeance was absolute. Admiral Valerius stood on the bridge, staring at the green-blue world below. Harrow stood beside him, awaiting the order. Dr. Thorne's avatar appeared on a screen, silent, observing. Decades of pain, of loss, of simmering rage had led to this moment. The power to annihilate the heart of the hegemony was theirs. Then, Admiral Valerius spoke, his voice tired. Station Prime remembered, he said, the words carrying across his fleet. They have paid. There was a pause, the silence thick with anticipation. They know fear now. They know loss. To unmake their world. That makes us them. He looked at the planet, then turned away. Leave orbit. Proceed to the next phase. The fleet turned. They did not fire on Hegemony Prime. They did not land troops. They simply left. It was not mercy, not forgiveness. It was a calculated decision. The Kthar military was broken. Their ability to inflict harm on humanity was gone. Annihilation would have been the easy path, the cathartic release. But it was also the path that mirrored their oppressors. Instead, they left the Kthar to live with their defeat, with the knowledge of their vulnerability, with the gnawing fear that the silent ships could return at any moment. The galaxy, watching, didn't understand. Was this restraint? Or a more profound, chilling form of punishment? Fear gripped the Union. They had stood by while Station Prime burned. Now, the power unleashed by that act stood on their doorstep. The old order had fallen, not with a bang, but with a silent, terrifying withdrawal. The fall of the Kthar hegemony left a power vacuum, but it was a vacuum filled not by human expansion, but by the cold, heavy weight of their silent dominance. The galaxy entered a new era, defined by fear. Humanity established no empire in the traditional sense. They annexed no systems, demanded no tribute. Their sphere of influence became known as the Quiet Zone, a vast territory that encompassed their home systems and the ruined core of the former hegemony, now a desolate, sparsely populated wasteland under human oversight. Borders were not lines on a map, but zones of exclusion enforced by silent, unseen patrols. Ships that strayed too close were met with chilling warnings, or simply disappeared. Other oppressed species, emboldened by the Kthar's defeat, saw in humanity a potential savior. Uprisings against Union dominance flared across the galaxy. Messengers came to the Quiet Zone, carrying pleas for aid, for alliance, for leadership. Admiral Valerius, now the de facto leader of a vastly transformed humanity, met with few. His response was always the same, delivered without emotion: we fought for ourselves. Do not mistake our vengeance for altruism. Find your own strength. Humanity became an inspiration, a cautionary tale, and an enigma all at once. They had shown the galaxy the cost of underestimation, but offered no roadmap for the future. Within the Quiet Zone, the cost of victory was a heavy burden. The grim resolve that had unified humanity began to fray around the edges. There were those who believed the Kthar should have been annihilated, that leaving them alive was a weakness that would inevitably lead to another conflict. A faction emerged, led by a charismatic former general named Richter, advocating for a galaxy-wide campaign of preventative justice, eliminating any potential threat before it could materialize. They saw humanity's power not just as a shield, but as a sword to reshape the galaxy by force. Others, like Talia, a young officer who had only known the transformed, militarized society, questioned the endless readiness for war, the somber silence that had replaced the vibrant chaos of old Earth. They saw the grim faces of their leaders, etched with the trauma of Station Prime, and wondered if the cost of never forgetting was an inability to ever truly live. Dr. Thorne continued his research, but his focus shifted, haunted by the destructive potential he had unleashed. Solace, the AI, remained inscrutable, its calculations focused on optimizing security, identifying threats, external and internal. The remnants of the Union government, terrified, fragmented, and in disarray, posed less of a threat than humanity's own internal conflicts. The old arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate scramble for survival. They watched the Quiet Zone, terrified of provoking the silent giant. But new dangers brewed. The fanatical Richter faction within humanity grew, whispering of necessary purges and total control. And in the darkest corners of the galaxy, remnants of the Kthar hegemony, those who had fled to the void, regrouped, licking their wounds and plotting a vengeance born of pure, unadulterated hatred. A new, fragile status quo settled upon the galaxy. Humanity, the formerly weak and underestimated, now stood as the undisputed, silent power. Their dominance was not one of vast borders and public pronouncements, but of chilling capability and the profound knowledge that they could, if pushed, unmake any system, shatter any fleet, erase any species from existence. They had ensured survival, but at the cost of their old innocence, their naive belief in diplomacy and reason. Admiral Valerius, the scarred leader, bore the weight of this transformation. He had guided his people through vengeance, secured their future through terrifying power. But the ghosts of Station Prime still walked the silent halls of his command ship, and the question of what humanity was now, and what it was becoming, weighed heavier than any fleet ever could. Humanity's new role was that of the silent guardian, the ever-present shadow. They policed the quiet zone with ruthless efficiency, but rarely intervened beyond their self-defined borders. They did not offer guidance, only the stark example of their rise. The galaxy learned to walk on eggshells, to avoid provoking the ones who remembered. But the lingering threat remained. Richter's faction gathered strength, believing Valerius had shown weakness by not finishing the job. The Cthar remnants, though scattered, were driven by a hatred that mirrored humanity's own past pain. The cycle of violence was not broken, merely paused, the players changed. The final message of this era was written not in words, but in the silent space where the Cthar core worlds had once been vibrant metropolises. Those systems were left abandoned, scoured of life, a grim monument to the consequences of arrogance. But Hegemony Prime, spared from annihilation, stood as a testament to a different kind of power, the power of choosing restraint, not out of mercy, but out of a grim determination not to become the monsters that had created them. It was a precarious resolution, a peace built on the shifting sands of fear and unresolved trauma. The galaxy looked upon humanity, upon the quiet zone, and remembered. Remembered the screams. Remembered the silence. Remembered the return. They had taught a terrible lesson. The question that hung in the void was not whether the galaxy would forget again, but whether humanity, in its terrifying power, would remember what it meant to be human. The war was over. What followed was the long, uncertain watch, under the shadow of the ones who had remembered, and would not forget.